at her center several times. So she and I had become very good friends. And it turns out that she was a personal friend of Cardinal Danileou, the chief cardinal of the Catholic Church of all of France. At that time, she was actually dying. And I went to see her, and I begged her if she would do a favor for me. And I told her that Srila Prabhupada was visiting, and he had been received by the city of Paris officially. And I begged her if she would please help us arrange a meeting with Cardinal Danileou, and she agreed.
Paris in these early 70s was a very political environment, and Cardinal Danileou fit right in. He was known as the Bohemian priest. He had a very strong following among young people, even though young people, for the most part, were very anti-religion. If anyone had an ability to circulate among them, it was Danileou. He managed to maintain a very broad-minded and open-minded position among young people. Danileou, in his own way, was making a contribution, I think, reaching out to young people who were completely atheist and attempting to bring some sense of the value of a God-focused life into their purview. Still, because it was a ritualistic Catholicism, he didn't appreciate, for example, the philosophy of the soul present in all life forms.
The devotees were amazed by the discussion because it showed that here is the top man in the Catholic Church, and he's an intellectual. He's not only a performer of rituals, but he's a top intellectual. And in the presence of Prabhupada, he was not able to discuss significantly the topic of compassion and nonviolence, and he was unable to comprehend the subject. And it made me realize why Srila Prabhupada agreed to meet such people. It was more for the devotees than any other reason, because we were able to see that although these were big people in French society or in society, they actually were very small in comparison with the pure devotee of Krishna. And that was important for the devotees to see.
I remember thinking when I was really early, why did my parents have to die? So that was already kind of in there. And then the Bible school and the Christians having fun things, and you'd go to that and spend a week, and they tell you stories about Jesus, and it always seemed very attractive to me. And then as I got older, I started going to churches with friends and different Protestant churches. We'd get to a point in the Sunday school, and I'd ask a question about, well, what happens to all those people that don't know anything about Jesus? You know, the Eskimos or the people in Africa or whatever. And they'd always come up with this idea that, well, no, I mean, to be saved, you have to know about Jesus. And it just didn't seem fair. And I'd argue a little bit, and then I'd lose interest in that church. And eventually I ended up at the Catholic Church. And when I asked them that question, they said, well, you know, innocent people don't go to hell. There's purgatory or there's limbo, and we pray, and there's a process. And they can move up to heaven. And it seemed to make sense to me. And I thought, okay, that seems fair. And Shruti Rupa and I, by then, had kind of got also interested together. We had been friends since elementary school and lived down the street from each other. So she and I and my two sisters started going to catechism at the Catholic Church, and we did that for a while, and eventually my sisters and I got baptized. The Catholic nun, Sister Dominica, she encouraged me to go for confirmation. It's like the next step in the Catholic Church. You pass a slight little test, they ask you questions, and if you have any doubts, this is when your doubts would be cleared up, because you're going to go through this ceremony and you're going to take the Catholic faith as your faith. And if you fall away later, it's a more grave sin. It's a mortal sin, a stain on your soul that cannot be removed easily. So I was going to classes, and now I came up with a different question. What happens with my pets? Do my pets go to heaven? And it was totally sentimental on my part because I wasn't a vegetarian, but I just wanted to know. And she was very sorry. The nun kind of put her head down a little and said, no, animals don't have souls. Only people have souls, so only people go to heaven. And again, that just didn't seem fair to me. I mean, I was by then 12, and in the end, I went ahead and got confirmed because I thought, well, I haven't found anything that makes more sense. And then life goes on, and adolescence comes in, and you get distracted, and you're a teenager, and so many things happen. And interestingly enough, Shruti and I remained good friends, and we would get into kind of other things together. We'd talk about Siddhartha or just Eastern stuff in general. Not real deep, but just it was the hippie kind of thing to do. It was kind of cool. And at some point in all of that, I had made a type of commitment that if I hear the truth, I'll accept it. And around soon after that, I happened to see a TV show with the Hare Krishnas on it. It was a news thing, quick, from out of Miami, and that would have been local for Key West. But the thing that I remembered was the 4 regulative principles. And so I heard that, and I immediately kind of made a decision. I don't know if I want to find out too much more about this, because it might actually be the truth. And I just didn't really want to risk, the 4 regulative principles seemed a little severe to me. And so I just didn't really want to know. And I kind of even almost made an effort to avoid the devotees. Once I saw devotees across the street, and I went to the other side of the street. And then, a little time passes, and Shruti and I decided to take a trip to Europe. We were going to meet friends in Germany that were in the army and travel with them a little bit. And just before we left, somebody at the airport gave us the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and a BTG. And so we traveled. We, really immediately realized after some difficulty and some ups and downs with our friends that we didn't really have too much in common with them. And we just traveled on our own a little bit. And then we just decided, why are we traveling all around? What are we looking for? We should just go back to our home and try and just be stable people. And so she gets the idea. She has this BTG. She says, why don't we go to the temple? And it was kind of a difficult trip to get to Paris. We had trouble with being vegetarians. So we got to Paris, and we got off at a train stop. And there were 2 quite large men that were selling there. And Shruti immediately went up to them and asked them directions to how to get to this address. And they kind of gave us instruction, and we started heading in that direction. And we realized that it didn't seem quite right. So we stopped and asked in a hotel. And that man told us we were going in a completely wrong direction. So we left the hotel, and we turned, and we started heading the way he told us to go. And then we realized that these fellows were following us. It could have been coincidental, but then when we changed directions, then they also still were following us. It was just a scary scene. We were kind of starting to walk faster and faster. They were walking faster and faster. We were hoping that at the end of this street, there was going to be the door with the number on it. So we see the 4 on the door. We start pounding on the door, and that's when the door swings open, and light just comes pouring out, and incense comes billowing out, and music comes out, the chanting comes out, and Indradumna, dressed in white, looking very angelic, says, yes, can I help you with something? And we just said, we need help, we need to come in. And he said, sure, and he just lets us in, and he closes the door, and it was like he closed out all this scary stuff on the other side, and everybody looked up and smiled at us. And so he took us upstairs, and he said, these girls just arrived. And Bhagwan was very friendly. He came out and he said, oh, hello. And we talked for a little while, and we ended up staying up all night and working and being helpful. We took showers and had something to eat, and then the next day was the Rath Yatra festival, so we went to the park, and there was a feast and a class and a nice kirtan. And I remember Sitting there listening to that class, it was really sweet, and the philosophy was so clear. And I could just feel the tears coming out of the sides of my eyes because I was thinking, this appears to be the truth. You know, I looked at Shruti and she looked at me and she just said, this is amazing. And, you know, I was agreeing, we were just like stunned. What did we stumble into? And Bhagavan walked around after that and he asked us how we were doing, and we said, oh, okay. And he said, well, you know, our spiritual master's coming in a few weeks. Why don't you girls think about staying for a couple weeks and then you could meet him? And he said, you know, you could help. We're trying to get ready. We need some sewing. We need some cleaning. We need painting. And we've got the new temple. And when we didn't look like we were jumping at the opportunity, he said, and you could always go sightseeing. You know, it's in Paris. You could go to the museums and stuff and then just do a little work during the day. And, you know, of course, we never went to any museums. We stayed, and pretty soon we were fully engaged doing things around the temple, all the usual things that have to be done. And I was sewing a lot. That's what I had done before I was a devotee. I was a seamstress. So I was sewing every day. And I did a lot of the sewing in Prabhupada's room, his asan, the curtains, and things like that. And I remember distinctly every day going in and praying because I was kind of confused. I mean, these seemed like really nice people. And that's how I would pray. I just said, you know, these seem like really nice people, and they say this man who's coming is your servant. And I don't know if that's true or not. But in case he is, I would like to be a little bit helpful. And I would like to know if he is. So that was kind of the mood. And that went on for a few weeks. And then Srila Prabhupada did come. And, you know, it's a flurry of excitement because he didn't come to France very often. So the devotees were really getting ready with programs and people to come see him, and, you know, dignitaries and educated people. And everybody was real excited. When Prabhupada came in, I remember him sitting on the Vyasasan talking, but I can't really remember what he was saying. I don't really remember really connecting with him. I mean, he seemed nice enough, but I was more kind of involved in the activity. There was always something to be done, and, you know, somebody directing you, take this here, take that there. And so everybody was very gracious, and I particularly remember that Yogeshwar was very gracious. He was always trying to include, and I was still kind of bewildered. And Yogeshwar was really excited about Prabhupada speaking to this cardinal, and he was playing it for us. And, you know, I was interested, and so he starts the tape, and Prabhupada's speaking with Cardinal Danileou, and we're listening, and, you know, there's translation, and you're getting the gist of it, and it seems like two elderly gentlemen that seem to be equally dignified, exchanging ideas about spiritual life. And it's kind of vague, but I got the gist of that, and it flows. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, Prabhupada says, what about the animals? And even today, I mean, without a doubt, even today, I get like chills when I think of that, because I went, what? And Prabhupada says, what about the animals? And he goes into a whole thing about the animals, and the cardinal says the same thing that the bishop had said to me years before. Well, the animals don't have a soul, and he makes all these justifications. You need the meat to eat, and people, it's more important to feed people. And Prabhupada answers one question after another, and the cardinal persists. It seems to be almost I won't say a battle, but you know, Prabhupada's he won't let him off the hook. And he brings up the analogy of if a man has two children and one child has diminished capacity, does he love the one that's not so intelligent less than the one that's qualified? And of course the animals have a soul, and of course the animals... And I mean, it never fails to move me. All of a sudden I felt this real clear understanding, almost like a voice. Yes, this man is my servant. Yes, this man will answer your questions. He will answer the questions you forgot you had. and the questions you haven't even thought of yet. I mean, it was like so clear that I was stunned. So I didn't